Now we want to make the mesh into a mountainous area, so we subdivide the mesh as you would with a normal modifier, but within geometry nodes. And now we're going to add a texture. So we'll have a texture for a height map and we'll have a texture for a density. And we take the colour from the texture, which will be a black and white, and we multiply that by a scaling factor to match the size we want our terrain to be. And then we feed that into, we need to move it in the Z direction. Now we have a vector output which we can input into the offset vertices of our subdivided mesh. And we see that it's moved the mesh up, but it hasn't moved the instances of rocks. So we need to take the subdivided mesh and the offset and do that before we distribute the points onto the subdivided mesh. Now we're going to try drawing onto the plane, drawing onto the texture, and use that to move the mesh upwards. So we go to texture paint. In the material for the plane, we've used the height map as to colour the ground so we can see where we're drawing. But we see there's something very odd happening here. The UV is incorrect, and this is one of the quirks. We have to set the UV as an input to the geometry nodes. So the UV map comes from the geometry node in the modifier properties. And now we see that it works correctly, that there's a one-to-one mapping between the UV and the location of the height displacement. So now we need to do the same thing with the density. So we use the same UV, we can input the same UV map into this density as well. We'll create a new texture, and this time we'll make it black, so there's no the default is no density rather than mid-grey, which was the elevation, and we feed that black and white output of that into the density factor. You can see there's something not quite right here, and that's because we were doing, the last brush we used was the blur brush rather than the painting brush. Works very well. Obviously there's some tidying up, and the resolution of the point distribution and the resolution of the texture will vary how much detail you can get with both of these things.